Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm Steve Taplin, your host and a tech serial entrepreneur. Over the years, I've started 30 companies, failed at 20 of them, and hit big with 10. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into a book called Fail Hard, Win Big. This is where I talk about how I learned how to use failure as a superpower versus something to take you down, and how I share that custom software became the difference maker in every win I've had. Today, I lead Sonatify Technology. We are a nearshore software development company known for delivering functional prototypes in just 7 days and offering free 90-day trials on our engineers, because we believe in earning trust, not just locking clients in. We got a fun guest today who has got a heck of a background. Aditya Jami, he has been an engineer with Yahoo, Netflix, Stanford. He's been a co-founder, a multi-time CTO. Aditya, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Nice to be here.
And what a beautiful background you have in the San Francisco Bay Area. To our listeners, I had to ask if that was a fake background because it looks so pretty and nice. Aditya, please give our listeners a few-minute overview of the journey of your career.
Sounds good, Steve. So, hi, everyone. So, I'm currently the CTO for Meltwater, but my path to Meltwater is really a journey shaped by a love of tackling tough data challenges at scale. After my grad school at Stanford, I went on to work at Yahoo and Netflix, where I really got a crash course in terms of what it means to be an engineer, production-grade distributed systems. So, I worked on a large-scale data processing pipeline, moving around like 300 billion plus events every day, and which was essentially powering most of the advertising and search algorithms that Yahoo was imposing on its different properties. And then I moved into Netflix, where I was responsible for developing a lot of systems, but some of the predominant ones that got open sourced were Chaos Monkey and Priam. And for me, it was really the first-hand experience about what does it mean to build a high resilient and reliability large-scale distributed systems. Then I dove into
those are two pretty huge companies and complex engineering challenges.
Absolutely. I think a key sort of learning is you only get it when you work on like end to end, but actually as the things scale, these were actually like the rapid evolution times for Netflix too. This was essentially at the time when Netflix was morphing into a streaming company. This is like late 2000s and early 2010s, right?
Well, this was starting with the DVDs, right?
Yeah, this was originally, the original tech stack was very much around how do you ship DVDs. And then essentially Netflix became like a streaming company, right? On mobile devices, on gaming consoles, initial days of the smart TV. So
now we're both aging ourselves. Now our listeners know we're both old.
Absolutely. I still remember one of the perks we used to have back at Netflix was you can actually get unlimited DVDs. That's essentially one of the perks of working there.
And our kids probably don't even know what DVDs are.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Now everything is on the tap of a button. It's all like personalized content recommendations, but it started with some humble roots there for sure. But one of the interesting things there is really about whenever there is like a rapid evolution or a scale up of a company, right? The systems gets very challenging, architecture gets very complex, but there are lots of solid software engineering principles. If built right, it also scales right. So I was fortunate to experience a lot of those system level thinking and the kind of best practices that needs to be enforced. And this was even during like the early days of cloud. So we were one of the first early big customers of AWS, right? When AWS only had like EC2 and S3. Those are the two only offerings that they had back then. And one of the reasons we built Chaos Monkey was the cloud was actually not super reliable. So we really had to simulate failures. So this sort of resiliency and real world systems is something that every production facing engineer needs to learn about. But yeah, beyond sort of Yahoo and Netflix, I also dove into AI and robotics, since AI was my primary background from grad school. I worked as a visiting research scientist at Cornell and also contributed to Stanford's RoboBrain project. That's essentially where I got exposure to where research and real-world applications can be fused. After that, I co-founded a venture-backed marketing intelligence startup, at which point you can imagine I literally wore every hat from architecting systems to leading teams to hiring your first engineer to doing customer calls. How do
Probably the
you
marketing guy and the guy helping to take out garbage as well. You do it all in a startup, right?
you do it all? But the great thing is that's when when you start companies, when you do it, you get to feel the customer problem firsthand, and there
Yes.
is the reward at the end, right? How we first understood the problem, the solution which you probably just hypothesized or prototyped, right? When it actually solves real needs, and once you start seeing scaling with in terms of repeated customer use, there is a certain amount of uh, a closure and a sense of pride and accomplishment you get when compared to yeah, one of the many systems that you're contributing to, right? So that sort of 0 to 1 journey is also super rewarding, I would say. And yeah, eventually ultimately I was drawn to Meltwater because it brings together everything I love, essentially the big data, the AI, and the opportunity to make a global impact. And as a CTO here, I led to lead our engineering teams, driving innovation, platform reliability, and most importantly, turning the vision into results our customers really care about at scale.
Now, for those who are not familiar with Meltwater, give the high level overview of what the company does.
Yeah, so Meltwater is a media intelligence company. So what we do is we ingest all the online news, social media, pretty much any sort of conversation that happens online, and we derive insights out of that using AI and machine learning. To give a bit of a sense of the scale, we bring in close to 1.5 to 1.6 billions of conversations every single day into our platform,
Wow.
and we use a combination of proprietary AI methods in the field of natural language processing, natural language understanding, computer vision to extract the main information that's being discussed in those conversations. And we index all of this into a massive search cluster where our customers can do like very powerful search and analytics, both from like a real time analytics perspective and also for doing a lot of historical analysis. Typically used by, I would say, corporate comms, marketing, government agencies, anyone who wants to have a pulse on what's happening online, they typically use our product, served globally with over 27,000 customers.
I'm assuming you really know how to handle mass amounts of data. That's an insane amount of conversations you guys are pulling in every day. How did you land the role as CTO at Meltwater? I always like, being a CTO is a tough job. It's been a very volatile place. And I know a lot of our listeners always like the inside scoop of
Mhm.
how others got their CTO roles.
Yeah, as you can imagine, I was not hired as a CTO. I was essentially hired to lead the development of the underlying platform that we
Okay.
have here at Meltwater. Meltwater used to be primarily a news intelligence company, which was basically doing like media monitoring, news monitoring. But with the evolution of social media, where a lot of discussions are actually happening on social and other formats of media coming in, the company strategically wanted to build a platform that can handle at scale. To just give a comparison, right? I think we're doing around like 3 million articles a day when I joined, and now we do like 1.7 billion a day. So it
Amazing.
required a massive amount of engineering work to essentially build this sort of next generational platform on top of which a lot of our new product portfolio sits. So yeah, through the time, I basically led several teams into across different layers of our stack and eventually looking at our overall engineering.
All right. So you came in as a senior engineering executive and worked your way up to CTO.
Yeah,
Love it.
precisely.
So tell us about some fun tech projects you have going on.
Sure. Maybe I can cover a little bit about one of the big launches that we have done. This spring, we launched a product called Mira, and I'm super excited about that. Mira is essentially like a true AI teammate, not just another feature that we have, because it really brings together the generative AI and smart agents into a simple chat-based interface. So imagine this is like a chat GPT or Perplexity, but grounded on all the media data sets that we acquired and process across online media, social media, podcasts, broadcasts, and so on. The reason it's very interesting is, over the course of the time, there are some couple of friction points that our customers were facing, right? Especially around like the ease of use of any SaaS product. And there used to be a lot that used to be coded into the UI, which means that you need to map out a lot of customer journeys. But with the advent of generative AI, I think it essentially pushed us into thinking about what is the new AI UX for our product concept should look like. And that's essentially through a conversational layer, right? You can just basically express in like few sentences what is that you want to do, and the machine to do it for you. And again, essentially fully grounded on our data sets and on the intelligence that we have essentially captured for over a decade. It was super exciting because if it comes when it looks at like time to value, the customers can just come in. You don't even need onboarding. You can just start talking to it like how you're talking to like a chat GPT. You do the same, but it's grounded on the Meltwater data set. A lot of interesting work that actually went behind the scenes, which I'm happy to go into if it makes sense.
Give us some good, fun tech highlights of some tech challenges you guys solved to bring that to market.
Yeah. So I think from a technology stack perspective, right? In the past, we already had a very strong, solid foundation of information retrieval, a layer that we have, but it is primarily driven by, as I mentioned, right, we're bringing in 1.3 billion documents. So one of the first things that we have done is how can we use AI to generate those queries and refine those queries for our customers? Our customers really care about the relevance. It's about how can you reduce the data set into a smaller set, which is highly relevant to their campaign, highly relevant to their objective that they have. So we invested very heavily into like vectorization. So not only we were doing like keyword-based indices, we started like vectorizing the indices. And there is a lot of experimentation that goes in there, right? Like the way you represent these documents in a semantic layer is very different from like a news to like a social media. You have multilinguality as an aspect. So there is a fair amount of, I would say, iterations that have to go through before we can roll out our full vectorization strategy. That's an interesting tech challenge that we have to go through.
Interesting.
The second was around like this sort of how can you really tame the agents. So there is like agentic layer that was intercepting as that was trying to understand the natural language quotient and planning out a sequence of actions that it needs to do on top of our data set and on top of our product assets that we have. And as you can imagine, there's this whole new field around context engineering, right? It's like how do you take the prompt? How do you enhance it with the right context using a retrieval augmented generation layer? So we converted our information retrieval layer into like a RAG system that can be enhanced. But the real trick is how do you make sure that as you're sort of changing your prompts, it's not actually regressing. As many of your listeners probably knows, things like the LLMs, they're like very stochastic in nature. So every word in how you ask matters a lot. You will get like different answers. But when you're trying to make your agents do deterministic workflows, it's about how do you capture the corner cases and how do you have like eval systems so that you're actually improving your prompts over time so that at any point, at any change that we do is not actually regressing in the behavior. Very, very, very hard challenge. That's one of the reasons why a lot of the companies focus a lot on evals. But yeah, we had to really encounter it firsthand, and there were no sort of best practices or toolings out there, right? This field moved so fast.
Yes.
So there are lots of interesting learnings there as well.
So you have a pretty massive engineering team, over 300 engineers worldwide. Tell us how do you manage it? How do you go about that? That's a lot. That's a strong engineering army you have behind you.
Yeah, I would say we are a distributed organization, and maybe historically, right? We grew the team very organically, but we have also grown through acquisitions. So we have acquired several companies and roll-ups over the time, and it's really about integrating them into the core organization. I think we do. I think there are some certain philosophies that we have, which I would say are handy, right? It's about how do you give the right amount of autonomy to the teams with the right sort of alignment that is needed so that it sort of becomes one global cohesive view, which is very, very important, right? It's really about how can you enable the folks in your product and engineering organization, right, to let loose in a way and ensuring that we are all steering in the right direction. So a lot of the time actually goes in really aligning our teams, making sure that what we are working is truly translating into the business value, being very, very close to the customer as well, makes sense. And a lot of standard set of tooling and practices in terms of the SDLC and how we do it so that not everyone is trying to reinvent the wheel. So we have like a fairly large platform team as well, an infrastructure team as well that sets the foundations in terms of, everything to do with CI/CD to how the deployment needs to happen, what kind of security scans that's going to happen so that individual teams can be very autonomous in terms of building features or building the value to the customer without having to rethinking all the grunt work that needs done.
Very interesting. So you guys are a private equity owned company, And one of the hardest challenges all CTOs have is justifying the existence of engineering teams, what they're doing, and explaining it to non-technical stakeholders, whether it's executives or investors or board. What are key metrics with this massive engineering team that you have that you like to focus on that helps you communicate to those non-technical others that want to drill you?
Yeah. So luckily, I would say if you think about our overall revenue to the OpEx percentage, which is the cost of the engineering that we have, is in a very, very healthy ratio, mostly because a lot of things that we have done is at scale and it really impacts a large amount of our customer base. And, having 27,000 customers and having a very healthy business helps there as well. And in terms of what we built, in terms of the metrics, of course, they like to look at whether we are innovating, whether we are keeping our customers happy, whether they're renewing or not. They really like to translate a lot of things that we do in the product into the business metrics that comes out of it. I think that rigor is actually very, very healthy. But fortunately, also, I think in the last 2 years, right, because of Gen AI, it's really impacting every SaaS product that's out there because everyone is
Yep.
rethinking what does it mean to provide the right customer experience, right? So, which will only happen through rapid iteration, prototyping, knowing what the technology is today and also having a sense of where it's going to be in a year from now and trying to build for it. So we are bringing to the right market. So it's a good, healthy combination of innovation and also sort of ensuring that our current customer base is happy with the experience that we are currently providing at scale. Both were important, and I think the business, as long as you do a good job in translating the engineering metrics or product metrics into the right business metrics, right? Those conversations are always seem.
All right, so we got to geek out here a little bit with what you guys are doing with your new product launches with the sheer amount of data. Tell us about your tech stack
Yeah,
and why you've gone that route for this massive infrastructure.
for sure. I would say let's start with the bottom layer, which is, or maybe okay. Let me tell you where how our tech stack used to be, and how we have overlaid sort of the Gen AI agents on top of it, and
Perfect.
how it has impacted each layer. So at the bottom of the stack, right, like you think of like infrastructure and DevOps, we use Kubernetes and we use Terraform for infrastructure as a code. We are deployed on AWS and Azure, so we have a multi-cloud strategy there. Lots of serverless functions for burst workloads and a centralized sort of observability stack, which is very key to ensure that all the systems are reliably monitored and we have tracing and we can actually operationalize healthy. On top of that would be our data layer. So we use Elasticsearch for all our massive search and indexing. We use Kafka for our real-time event streaming. We use MongoDB for our semi-structured data and the knowledge graph and the feature store. And most of these services are built in like Java, Scala, and Kotlin. So it's predominantly a JVM stack in there.
Gotcha.
On top of that would be the AI ML. And this one is more around, call it like, now it's called traditional AI and ML, but this is really how can you extract the structure out of the data that we bring in. So there we use like PyTorch on Onyx runtime for model training and inference. We use transformers. We have our own sort of custom RAG pipelines, everything built in Python. And remember that these enrichments that we build needs to work across over 100 different languages. It needs to work on long news documents to like a meme that goes around in social. So there is a lot of fine tuning that happens to make these models work in data coming in different shape, data coming in different languages. And over time, it's also multimodality. We used to be predominantly text heavy. Now we do lots of video analysis, image analysis, the transcription within the videos. So there is a fair amount of AI that we do at individual document that we bring in. So all of this data, as I mentioned, is kind of indexed in our Elasticsearch, right? And then we have a set of products that sit on top. It has like a typical front-end, back-end style architecture. The front-end is predominantly like React, Next.js apps deployed through Vercel for sort of fast modular SPAs. And for the back-end APIs, it's predominantly Node.js with some GraphQL. And everything to do with the Python, we use sort of fast API and have gateways, like Kong gateways for unified routing and rate limiting.
Gotcha.
With
That was a really good job of explaining a hell of a complex infrastructure. Fantastic. What's your biggest challenge you got as a CTO today within the world you're living?
Yeah, I would say it's really, balancing the rapid AI innovation. We need to stay ahead of the market demands, especially with the transformative technology like Gen AI, right?
That's a pretty tough thing to do, considering by the time we're done with this podcast, there'll probably be two more new tools out that we haven't heard of.
Exactly, exactly. And you have to balance that with an enterprise grade stability and the security and the resilience that your customers already expect to make it happen, right? And we have to ensure that we're not really accruing tech debt as we push through a lot of these new features. And believe me, I think the number of new things that we're doing over the last 2 years has like really exploded because it's about trying out different experiences and ensuring that to understand what sticks the most. So you got to build it the right way, which is why I think I mentioned about having a stable foundation of a technology stack is super crucial, which gives us the ability to do it. But yeah, that is a definitely a concern. I would say growing costs of we can do a lot with AI, but it really unlocks the number of things that you can do, but it also comes at a cost. And
Yep.
luckily, some of the costs of the LLMs are going down, but you still have to host all your data. You have to re-dimension your data to make it friendly to agents. Your consumption is actually going up when compared to the past because it's much more easier to use your product with the agents now in. So your hosting actually does increase as you're trying to bring in a lot of these new AI features because the consumption is much more higher when
Yep.
compared to the baseline.
So how do you, as the CTO of a 300 plus person engineering team, how do you keep your skills sharp? I'd imagine you're not in the trenches coding. You got too big a team for that. How do you keep your coding skills sharp and make sure you're trying out the latest AI stuff? What's your secret there?
Yeah, I have to say now it's actually even easier than before. And I heavily use a lot of code gen tools, everything from, we have GitHub Copilot that we have rolled out within our organization. I always try out the new agents that, whether it's Cursor, whether it's like the German Cloud Code. There are a lot of tools that are out there. I think that gets you to tinker with the code. Of course, these days, thanks to the sort of the AI agents, right? Especially if you really want to deeply understand a code that you haven't touched in a long time, you can
Mhm.
just ask an agent to explain. And in the past, you probably need like a senior engineer who probably done that piece of thing. I think we have done some good things like aggressive documenting of the parts of the code that were not documented using these agents, really helping me to stay in touch with the code base that we have. Also, it's an art to put this sort of coding agents at the best for the best use cases. I have actually I've seen a study around really understanding after rolling out like the code gen, how much of the code is being refactored to reworked, and there are lots of online debate that's currently happening on how much it's productive and what is a developer I would say happiness is looking like. But there are definitely plenty of use cases where these tools turn out to be really good, and definitely you can do a lot more with it than without. But yeah, thanks to that, that gives me and
All
also
right.
sort of my management span be
That
close to the code that we have.
that keeps you on top of it. So earlier this year, Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, said, "Hey, within 5 years, we'll be able to reduce our engineering team by 60%." And last week, TechCrunch had a real good article about this big coding challenge that went against all the top AI coding AI is out there, and they bombed it. The AIs did horrible. And I
Mhm.
know the engineers out there are cheering. I personally don't believe that AI is going to replace software engineers. I believe it's going to evolve the role. But what do
Mhm.
you think?
Yeah, I think I'm more in the camp of I'm more in the camp of making a 1x engineer 3x or 5x, right? And also we underscore the importance of the developer efficiency and the developer experience aspect of it. It does really make some of the grunt work that we as engineers don't like to do, like writing test cases, or writing documentation, or having like a AI peer a review of PR to do the first level pass before you look at it. I think there are certain things it's definitely very good at. But I do think, one of the things I think people talk about this engineers as just about writing code. If you think about it, right, it's also having the entire in like a large enterprise code base, especially there is a lot of business context that is embedded into why a function is in a certain way or why the services are architected in a certain way. I think that's the kind of domain knowledge that the engineers carry, so that when you actually see something happening in a production system, really able to identify where to go look and how to adapt. It's not just about whether it's not just about looking at the logic of the code. There is more than that. The semantic aspect of why the code base is in that way is what engineers are really good at. And people also talk a lot about, yeah, long context windows. LLMs coming in can do a lot with the code, but with those long context windows, there is also a higher chance for the LLM to confuse even more. uh, so I think there are definitely areas where it can really help. Like one area where I've seen it really doing really well is it's very easy to get started like 0 to 1 on the new things that we're building out for sure, as long as they're like isolated with the rest of the stack. I've also seen in the past, like UX used to you know put Figma mocks, and that now can be converted into prototypes that they can build in Lovable or Vercel V0,
Yes.
because then they have a good understanding of the nuances of the code. Let's say if you plug it to the APIs in the past, right? They used to build a mock, but the data doesn't really accept with the mock that you have given. And there's a lot of back and forth that was happening between the UX and the engineering. And I've seen that if they're actually building the prototypes using the 0 to 1 code, they see those nuances themselves and they iterate before it even comes to the engineer to write into the production. So I see a reduction in time in terms of amount of time it takes from ideation to going live, which is again.
Uh, Aditya, we have to wrap this up. We've had,
Mm.
this has been a great conversation. You gave some phenomenal nuggets today, and hats off to you. You are truly a tech leader that's gone through it all, solved the engineering challenges you have had, successfully leading an army of 300 plus engineers and still have a smile on your face. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights. Before we wrap, what is your final advice out there for tech leaders who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these crazy times?
Well, I would say, embrace the new things that are happening. It's amazing how fast the field is evolving because of the rapid innovation that's happening in the modeling layer. That's actually fundamentally challenging all of us to think through what does a new product means, what's the new software mean. So I think it's about really embracing it, thinking about the future. It's not about what the models are doing now, but think about what the models can do in a year from now and design your product against it. And also, when it comes to developing with AI, right? The fundamental things around trying to understand your customer problem, that's still there. It's about solving the use cases. And it's also about having a rigorous production grade system that needs to evolve over time. Those foundations of SDLC and product building are still the same. It's the mechanisms through which we do it and the way you expose the interfaces is being disrupted by AI. So if you're a strong engineer, you actually have a lot more that you can do with this evolution. So I would say stay hungry about what's coming up and always embrace it.
Great advice, Aditya. Thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you like the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, tell your competitors about it. They could probably use it. Remember, everyone, to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.